license costs are skyrocketing, enterprises and governments are in turmoil, the future is uncertain. Where can we turn for solutions to the VMware crisis? Let's meet the Microsoft solutions we need right now. I'm Michael Richardson, CTO of Dynamic Consultants Group, and your host for this exciting podcast series. I'm thrilled to have Philip Elder joining me, Microsoft MVP that brings decades of experience with him. Philip, what do you want the audience to know about you?
I am, like you say, in the industry for at least 2 decades. My wife and I co-own our company, MPEX. We've been doing specifically virtualization solutions since Longhorn, so Server 2008. Prior to that was Virtual Server 2005, which Microsoft, if I remember correctly, acquired. And I knew back then that the reality with the advent of Core Duo and dual core processors, that the direction was pretty obvious, that more workloads on one box means better solutions for us, more efficient, less cooling, et cetera, but also more revenue, especially for hosting companies. So the whole BPOS, Office 365, AWS, Google Cloud, all that stuff was pretty easy to see coming down the pipe at that point. Prior to that, my big thing was small business server. I was an SBS MVP since 2009, prior to the current designation, which was high availability. And that came about as a result of the demise, if you will, of this SBS product, because all SMB belongs in the cloud. That's what I was told one year by a friend of mine who's a blue badge, still a blue badge. And so all of the skills, it's really cool. All of those skills that I've had since the late to mid 90s in Active Directory, Microsoft Exchange, back in the day, ISA, Internet Security and Acceleration Server, building all of the solutions out around group policy, everything that the SBS platform brought into play has dovetailed beautifully into what I do now. And that is the virtualization hypervisor, that part of the ecosystem, just one small facet of what I do. I'm able to take all of that experience and analyze any situation, any solution set, any environment, and come up with an audit, let's say, of everything, and say, okay, we need to go here, and this is what we need to do to bring your performance up. This is what we need to do to bring your security up, and this is how we need to Joe Click-a-Lot, how we need to deal with Joe Click-a-Lot and Jane Click-a-Lot over there, and move forward. So my experience is very broad and yet very focused. So I can finish with, I'm pretty darn good at what I do. I'm obviously still here in business Absolutely. After 20 some years. So
must be doing something right. That's for sure.
I think so.
And yeah, like you said, multiple decades of experience, and you know, we could probably spend hours talking about each one of the solutions you just talked about. It'd be a lot of fun. We'll have to talk more about those in the future. Sure. But shifting to our topic for this series, what can you tell us about what's going on with VMware right now, and why should organizations pay attention to this situation?
I'm going to take a big picture view of this one. I realize we're talking a little bit more specific, or the question based on what's in what you sent me is specific to the licensing model. But let's take a bigger picture first, and this is not going to be a happy per se. When this news came out, we as an SMB, SME, let's say less than 5,000 virtual machines. Mm-hmm. I don't know what Broadcom's delimiter is for where they took the cutoff, but when this whole thing started, the obvious reaction around our ecosystem or our environment was just shocking. It was a shock and awe kind of situation.
Yeah.
But the reality, so I found out later on down the road, is that 80% of VMware's licensing belongs to their top 1,000 customers. Top 1,000.
Wow.
Let's think about that for a minute. You're talking about not even a sliver of the total breadth of number of folks running VMware in the world, but we're talking about just a sliver, right? So when when I found that out, I took a step back and went, wait a second, whoa, let's reevaluate everything, because we're talking about billions, right? It's something that's not really fathomable for me. I don't know, most people, I think, can't really fathom the idea of having $1 billion to spend, never mind tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars. So taking that step back, now I'm going to speak as a business owner. If I'm going to go and buy something, I'm going to buy something that's going to give me what I expect, which is a product and service and/or service. I'm going to get the value that I expect, and if I don't, I'm going to say, see you, right? That's the general rule of thumb when it comes to a transaction. So when I look at what Broadcom has done with VMware, I'm just, wow, man, it's brilliant. What they did and what they are doing is absolutely brilliant. Yes, it's surgical. There's a very specific set of steps that Broadcom is taking in order to walk through this whole process. But what I see, and I live in the SME world, so what do I know, right? But what I see is at the end of this process that Broadcom is going to walk away with, I'm going to say 200%, 300%. Remember, we're talking billions here, right? And we're talking long picture. We have a tech TMI thing going on where our brains are always being inundated, and to step away from that and look at long goal, right? Whatever you call it, long-term goals. Broadcom is playing long here, and yeah, holy sugar smacks, man. The dollars these guys are making already, never mind what they're going to make in the long term, huge. So in my mind, it's a huge win for Broadcom. Not so much for the other than 22 or so U.S. partners that got axed in the process of this process of change, or to all the hosting providers that are now looking at getting saddled with huge volumes of increase on their revenue, or their expense, I should say, for their licensing. Now we can get into the topic at hand. So as a business owner, again, when it comes to our experience, my experience, I went through my existential crisis in 2011 when Microsoft announced the demise of SBS. And that comment, like I said earlier, of everything belongs in the cloud as far as SMB and even SME is concerned, right? So here I am today watching folks around me go through a similar existential crisis, because we've got entire dreams, business dreams, built on VMware and providing solutions to their customers. And now they're sitting here going, oh, I have to tell my customers that I have to give them an increase of 2 or 3 or 400%. Yeah, tough. Now, our process of going through that crisis, or my process with the backing of my wife, who is very good at helping me see past all of my panic and frustration and anger. I still have a bit of a chip on my shoulder, which is reflected in my opinions. And I acknowledge that. The fact is that now the folks that are running VMware, especially on the hosting side, there's something in the Microsoft world called the Service Provider Licensing Agreement. That's the SPLA. We do SPLA. We host on Microsoft products, and it's been a relatively stable licensing program since we started in the Windows, even before Windows Vista. We were right into SPLA way back in the day. And back then, Windows Vista, we could put Windows Vista into a SPLA environment without any question, right? We could license 100 desktops, 1,000 desktops, but Windows 7 changed all that when Microsoft went, ooh, wait a minute, I want that pie, my opinion, right? I want that pie. And that is the key right there to everything we've experienced in SME and SMB over the last 15 years. I want that pie. And now we've got Broadcom going, I don't even want your pie.
Yeah.
We're a cost center to them. If you got your top 1,000 up here and everybody else underneath that, that's a huge amount of time that they have to invest, if you will. Now it's a cost center. Anything and everything to do with support is seen as a cost center, and you just have to experience support. And it doesn't matter. It's tech, our incumbent telephone, or incumbent telephone and cable or any industry right now that you get shuffled into banking, into an IVR system from hell. I never end up talking to anybody. It's a cost center, anybody. So I'm long-winded, and ultimately, I hope something that I've said is relevant, but suffice it to say, there are options. Take a deep breath, step back. Believe me, it took me 2 years to step back, and I'm still stepping back because there's still a part of me that's really pissed off with what we were given as partners back in the day, because Microsoft told us in SME and SMB in the BPOS days, you're done. And I mean, literally, the mailers we were getting from Microsoft is choose a different business model because you're done. And I went, well, after 2 years, I went, no, actually, I'm not done. I think I see things differently. So that's going to be the big one is, where is the value? What can you do to facilitate? Because remember, I'm going to take a step here. 2 things that are happening in the hosting environment for VMware. One, you're still hosting Windows servers, right? You're still remote desktop services. Your remote exchange mails. Some of you may still be doing. We are. Exchange mail is a big thing. I don't want my mail read by some AI whatever, or you never know, right? Now look what's happening with Meta right now. They're refusing anybody opting out. You're running Windows servers, or you're running Linux. Okay, so you got Windows on one side, and you got Linux on the other, and what are you running it on? You're running it on VMware. Well, what the chicken, man? Put it on Hyper-V. Oh, Hyper-V, it's fun time, right? Oh, it doesn't exist anymore. Microsoft's deprecating it. Oh, they're putting it on. Dude, we based our business on Hyper-V for the last how many years? Since 2008. And Virtual Server before that. It's not going anywhere. And in fact, it's improved in Server 2012. I'm in a bit of a time warp. In 2025. Why would I base my client's business, you and I who do business, right? And we build solutions and we put software together and we make them work. This is it, man. They're in our hands. So why would I base my entire life's blood and my client's entire life's blood, their dreams and my dreams on a product that don't work? Hello, McFly. I wouldn't do that. And I certainly wouldn't do that to customers who are running accounting firms that are making, right now, tax season on the corporate side is tens of thousands of dollars an hour. Why would I do that? So, perspective. Windows, Linux, hypervisor. Well, it's VMware today. Well, no, it can be Hyper-V tomorrow. And if you really need good performance, it can be Storage Spaces Direct. And if you really want the cloud hybrid thing, well, Azure Stack HCI may eventually become SPLOC compliant or something along those lines. We'll see what happens. But right now, that's tenant only, single tenant only. So you have to get them, build them. And it is what it is at this point. And there's a lot of discussion on that side too. But suffice it to say, you and I have what it takes and what we need to make our businesses continue past VMware and build on a Microsoft solution. Because realistically, there is no other out there that has the ecosystem that Microsoft does. And I'll finish on that point.
Man, so tons of great stuff you said there. Let me summarize a few of those, and then I want to ask a few more questions. So, sure. First of all, organizations should care about what's going on with VMware because VMware is basically dropping everybody under their top 1,000 customers. They don't care about you. License costs are going through the roof for everybody. It's time to look at other solutions. And you know, something that you said was Hyper-V is absolutely alive and well and drastically being improved. You've built your own business of hosting on top of Hyper-V and working with other organizations hosting on Hyper-V for a long time, all the way back to 2008 and earlier. And something that you just said, and I want to ask you to maybe expand on this a little bit, is you said there's no other platform besides Hyper-V and Microsoft solutions that have the type of enterprise level support ecosystem around them. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. We've got other hypervisors out there, some pretty GUIs, pretty UIs, and all that kind of stuff. Others that are saying, hey, look at us, look at us, look at us in the open source environment. Okay. There's one possible other viable solution out there that is hyper-converged, can do stretch and all that kind of thing. Red flag. Customers are not allowed to talk publicly about that product. Excuse me? Red flag number 2. I go to their forum and I can't find anything about, I'm having problems with this, I'm having problems with that, I'm having problems with that. Okay, so I'm going to go buy a new car. And let's say I'm going to go buy a Rivian, right? Everybody and their dog is talking about Rivian. Or I can buy a Tesla, or I can buy a red-eye Charger, which would be my preference. But I'm looking at a truck, so I'd go for a T-Rex. Let's say I'm going to buy a truck. I'm going to look at a T-Rex, I'm going to look at a Tesla Cybertruck, and I'm going to look at a Rivian. Those are my 3 options, or a Ford Lightning, let's say, and then just a standard Ford. Now, if I'm looking at those, and I go to the Rivian, there's hardly any information out there except of what the vendor is saying. Oh, look at our product, look at our product, look at our product. And then we go to Tesla and we can see, oh, look at our product, look at our product. And then we can see a bunch of people saying, hey, this product is great. And then we have a small cache of people that are saying, I'm having a lot of problems with this. And then we go on to the Ford side, and there's this huge ecosystem. Okay, yeah, it's mostly gas and diesel, but there's this massive ecosystem. And I'm looking at the Ford and I'm going, well, there's a lot of people. I've owned many Fords. There's a lot of people out there who are talking about the legitimate problems they're having with their Ford, with their Lightning, but they're also talking about the good things about it. So I get a nice balanced perspective on what the product can or cannot do. There's a lot of fanboys on all sides, fangirls, all that kind of stuff. Sift past that and get to the real meat and potatoes of the situation. Mm-hmm. So this particular vendor, hyper-converged, red flags. Okay, so that pretty much puts them out of running, in my opinion, despite what the Gartner quadrant thing says. So we move on to that, and then we move into the open source environment. We've got VMware and we've got Microsoft. Okay, VMware has an amazing ecosystem, which has basically been sliced and diced, and we don't need you. It's kind of like what we heard from Microsoft back in the SMB BPOS Office 365 days. But Microsoft didn't have a top 1,000 customers running the entire 80% of that business. Okay, so, but that being said, we have VMware, we've got the VMware Guru cert, the VMware Expert, the VM Experts, all of that ecosystem that's still there despite what Broadcom is doing. There's still a lot of very, very talented, smart people who can help out when somebody runs into a bit of a roadblock. On the support side, well, that's a cost center. So there's rumblings out there already of some issues as far as what's happening on the support side with VMware. And that's to be expected. Like I said, it's a cost center. Microsoft, same idea. We've got these amazing, talented people from all around the world who are very invested in the product, whether it's Windows Server and Hyper-V, SQL Server, the Exchange Server. Yeah, Microsoft's trying to cut that off, but I got to tell you, Exchange is an awesome product. It's simple. It just works. Once it's in, it just works. So what the chicken, right? Exchange, Hyper-V, Active Directory, and group policy, all on premises, whatever. Want to get into the cloud stuff, we can talk about that in a separate situation, because we're talking VMware is on-prem, okay? Mm-hmm. Right? So we got this entire amazing ecosystem of brilliant people around the world. When I'm searching for something, I type in something, and it really, I'm going to pat myself on the shoulder, because it really says, hey, that's cool, when the first result that comes up is something I've posted. And the reason I started posting was because so much stuff was happening, and I just couldn't keep track of it all. I couldn't keep it in here anymore. This thing was full. I started blogging and keeping track of it that way. That became my repository, and it became the repository of tens of thousands of people around the world, as is the case with so many other very brilliant people, much more brilliant than I. That's what Microsoft has to offer as far as a product platform and ecosystem. Yeah, support, VMware, yeah, support, but both offer an amazing ecosystem. Okay, so that's the big plus right there, is no matter what happens, we have somebody we can turn to that has gone through it or can help get through it, has the broad breadth of experience, wisdom as a result of that experience to pull through a problem or a solution that's needed, or to address a performance issue, whatever the case may be, networking, you name it, the whole breadth of an IT infrastructure. So the catch now, you've got tens of thousands of small companies, including hosting providers on VMware, that are looking for somewhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
If they decide to go with one of the open source companies that are providing some sort of open source solution, whether it's a standalone hypervisor or some sort of hyper-converged cluster or a cluster, whatever the case may be, the catch is support. One of the offerings who's saying, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me, is saying, yeah, you can do it. It's really simple. And well, from what I've seen, it's not necessarily simple, but their support is only 9 to 5 local time, and they're across the pond. If I'm in a pickle, I just ran an update and my whole hypervisor server or my entire cluster is down as a result. I don't want to wait until 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. or whatever the time is, European time, in order to get to the support I need. And then on top of that, I go searching for the problem I'm having. And because the ecosystem is that big relative to that big, right? I'm not necessarily going to find the information I need to fix my problem or work around my problem or whatever, or B, somebody to actually help me with my problem. Never mind the vendor, because I'm an MVP, so fortunately I have a kind of a back door, if you will, into pulling some weight on getting past the chaff, if you will, of support into the actual meat and potatoes. So that is not a possibility out there with all of the other vendors per se, except for VMware and their vExpert. I don't know anymore. So that's the big thing. Support, ecosystem, a plethora of information about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So in the long and short of it, if I'm going to buy that truck, it's probably going to be the Lightning. Why? Because there's such an amazing ecosystem there. Tesla's catching up. I drive a Ram 1500 Rebel, so you know I made my choice in 2015, 2016 to go with Dodge, but that's just because I grew up building 318s, 340s, 360s, 440s, and I'm kind of a Mopar guy, so I chose Mopar over the Ford, even though I'd owned some very amazing Fords in the past.
Cool. Well, that's a really critical component of the whole conversation, because we're really talking about organizations that have critical workloads, and you know there's thinking out there that, well, VMware is the only ones that can really support critical workloads, which is absolutely not true. I mean, we know that. Nope. Hyper-V is powering some huge enterprises, Microsoft included, but on top of that, the 24/7 critical support is really important. And you know, whether that's from partners or the vendor themselves, or just like you said, the ability to, there's just a lot of people that know the product, and you're not going to get that with some of these other offerings. So that's great perspective. Well, so, you know, we're starting to see a lot of interest in moving from VMware to Hyper-V or Azure Stack HCI. Let's talk about hardware for a second. Sure. This can get to be pretty deep, but can organizations just rip the Band-Aid off and let's just switch hypervisors, or what do they need to be thinking about there as far as existing hardware?
It's a tough question to answer, in the sense that many organizations are running 2 nodes. I think the majority of the cluster scenarios out there are 2 nodes. And any organization, so when we build a solution, our expectation is 60 months, a 5-year runtime for that solution. That's pretty reasonable. We can push to 6, but if you look at any tier 1 organization, their first 5 years, the warranty cost is this much. And then if you want to add another year, it doubles, right? And then if you want to add another year on top of that, it doubles on top of that. So just from a statistics point of view, the likelihood of something failing past year 5 is very significant, and it just keeps exponentially growing. Lifetime expectancy of most hardware solutions is 5 years. So in our case, that's our expectation. And failure rate wise, we're probably running industry standard across all of the solutions we've ever deployed. So that's probably about 1 to 2% of whatever components within the systems we are deploying, whether it's tier 1 or our own custom design solutions. It doesn't matter. So if you want to do a backup and restore, your backup vendor, it's Commvault, Veeam. There's others out there that can do that, where you're going to have to schedule some downtime, just flatten it, install Windows Server, data center, or standard data center, license it, set up your VM husks, and do a restore, a virtual independent restore into that VM husk on Hyper-V. And there will be a little bit of tweaking to be done to get the network set if the backup product doesn't do that as part of its process. But in the end, you're right where you were before. So that's one option. Another option is to do, and it may be possible, is basically to look at that 4 to 5 year mark on our hardware. Well, we should start planning on looking at purchasing new hardware anyway. We don't have to do the renewal of our VMware licensing. We've already, and this is the catch that I failed to mention earlier. If I have a cluster, let's say it's a 6-node or an 8-node cluster, and it's already running Windows Server Data Center as far as the workloads go. So I'm running, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 VMs per node, 100 VMs per node. It doesn't matter.
On VMware.
On VMware. You're already licensed for Hyper-V. It's built into the product. So there's no additional cost. So when we think about the cost of a data center license, just 16-core data center license off the cuff is something like $8,000, $7,000, something like that, last time I checked. So if I'm running, let's say 6 nodes, 8 times 6 is 40, I think. I don't know. So make it simple, right? That chunk of coin that I would otherwise be spending on licensing for Hyper-V now can be shuffled over into, well, maybe I can afford, or at least look at the option to purchase new hardware in year 4, year 5 of the existing hardware.
Because now you don't have to buy the VMware licensing.
That's right. Oh, there you go. Okay, so the cost of licensing for Hyper-V is already included in the data center license, and yes. Okay, so let's say the cost for all of the VMware, the vMotion, everything like that is, I don't know, $7,500, $100,000. I think I can buy a pretty nice kit for $100,000 US. I know we can build for $100,000 US. We can build a pretty nice storage spaces direct cluster, or we can look at Azure Stack HCI if there needs to be a hybrid component. But $100,000, you're starting to talk about some serious kit. You talk about the savings there, and the licensing is already there for Windows Server. We're looking at 150, 160 grand. So my numbers are, they're a little fudgy, but those are the kind of numbers I need to bring to the decision makers to say, okay, this is where we're at today. This is how we can proceed. So this is option 1. We buy everything new. This is option 2. Well, we got to do a backup restore, but that's downtime. Option 3 is, does it exist? I put it in the cloud and pay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, something I want to dive just one layer deeper on is with the hardware, because I know that that's a little bit of a touchy subject, especially when you start talking about storage spaces direct or Azure Stack HCI, and you have a little bit of a unique perspective, I think, because you build custom hardware solutions with validated components, right? And you guys do all of your own testing and everything, which is a little bit different than a lot of folks. But if I'm thinking, okay, I'm using vSAN and all that good stuff on VMware, and I'm going to just maybe my hardware is 2 years old, and I'm going, okay, I'm gonna just move to Hyper-V. I'm going to use storage spaces direct. What's your reaction to that?
I'm going to say I've got a recipe book. So what I would do in the first place is to ask them, could you send me a bill of materials or service tag? If it's a Dell solution, let me see the service tag. If it's an Intel solution, just send me a bill of materials, and let me have a boo at what you got in there. And then we'll start talking about the infrastructure that needs to be in place in order for us to move from the vSAN solution to the S2D storage spaces direct solution. So that would be the first place to start. And I'd know, yeah, right away. Okay. And then on top of that, the next question would be, okay, give me your statistics. If they don't have any, or their management software is lacking on tracking IOPS throughput and all that kind of thing, I'll send them to Dell's Live Optics site and get the agents installed and get some good perspective on what's happening at the host level and at the guest level, so we can get a pretty good picture on how the vSAN is performing. And then we can start talking about, okay, well, this is how we can solve that on the Windows side, the storage spaces direct or Azure Stack HCI side. And our recipes are agnostic. It can be a custom built solution, or it can be a tier 1. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think what you said there was really important about the bill of materials. Like, it really, really depends on the hardware. And I think, Hyper-V, of course, is very super broad support for hardware. I mean, you can run Hyper-V on just about anything. But when you start talking about the more advanced stuff, you start talking about storage spaces direct and doing software defined storage, things like that, it gets a little more touchy. Right. And so that's what's really critical for organizations to think about when, okay, if I'm going to try to reuse this hardware, it's key to really look at components, because there's a pretty significant chance that there's going to be hardware that's not on the server catalog, approved list. But it just depends. If you've already bought, some kind of a VMware validated solution from Dell or another vendor, it may be the same components already, and you may be good, but otherwise it may get a little bit touchy. And I think a lot of people are going, okay, we probably better just do new hardware that's validated otherwise. But I really appreciate your approach of like, let's really dive in and see what components are here, and is this going to work, or are we? Because nobody wants to be in this weird, like, well, it might work, but it's like,
there's
these aren't workloads we can do that with, right?
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. I've been doing this long enough that there is a certitude in just knowing what is and what is not going to work. We have a parts bin full of broken promises, some of them costing us 5 figures or more. So the biggest recommendation I can say when it comes to building out storage spaces direct or Azure Stack HCI solution set is to eliminate all single points of failure. That's important. So a lot of folks on the consulting side will say, oh, you can get away with, and just build a solution with the get away with. I worked for contractors back in the day who came from the school of good enough, and I got to be honest, I disliked working for those folks. My expectation is to do the best, right? So when it comes to looking at the current specification, because the node-to-node storage traffic travels over a pipe, it's lossless. So if we look at iSCSI or Fiber Channel or anything like that, their custom protocol, or iSCSI is just TCP/IP, but it's lossy, and there's a lot of mechanism built in, and there's just no performance. There isn't, and iSCSI is a real pain in the rear end. when it comes to vSAN, the node-to-node communication is pretty much standard fare. On the Storage Spaces Direct or Azure Stack HCI, we're lossless, and that requires what's called RDMA, Remote Direct Memory Access. My preference personally is for the NVIDIA Mellanox solution set, and that's just because it just works. We've seen Broadcom products come and go on that side. We've seen Chelsea, we've seen, like, there's been so many. Intel's got lots of problems with their 700 series. There's some problems with the 800 series. So remote RDMA over converged Ethernet, which is RoCE, R-O-C-E, is the direction we always go in. That involves switch programming, that involves OS programming, and it just, once everything's in, and as long as the network team leaves things alone, it just works. Because it does. So we end up with, if you take iSCSI on one side and fiber channel is here, and then RDMA is here. It basically takes the raw I/O and moves it between the nodes, between the memory on each node. Okay. You can use iWarp, which is all the big vendor support, which is another form of RDMA. Doesn't require any switch programming, doesn't require anything special to be done in the operating system. There's catches to using it, but it works. So the hardware that we're in the existing solution set for vSAN needs to support at least iWarp. So it's got to be an Echo 810 series Intel network adapter set, or Broadcom. I can't remember which ones on the Broadcom side support that. And there may be some other vendors that I'm not recalling at the moment. But that's the catch. The node-to-node communication for storage, that is very important, because that's, if your storage is latent, it don't matter how big your processor is. If your storage is latent, it's a very painful place to be.
Yeah. But when you get it right, man, Storage Spaces Direct, the performance is really incredible. You know, and I've heard people even say, you know, I would put it up against any other software-defined storage platform out there, and it's really amazing. So
I agree. And the earlier mentioned hyper-converged product that has the series of red flags, if we put S2D or Azure Stack HCI side by side with their product, there's no comparison, but you get the UI, right? A lot of folks are point and click as opposed to PowerShell and command line, and actually getting into the nuts and bolts and levers and dials and buttons and that. So that'll be another big question mark as well, as supportability from the on-prem IT team and the skill set that's involved there.
Yep. Well, you know, there's tons more topics I'd love to dive into. I think we could keep talking for another hour easily. You know, we've covered a lot of these topics, but I think we probably need to start wrapping up. And so I guess my last question is, for organizations that are wrestling right now, they've got VMware, they're wrestling with, where do I go? What do I do about this huge license increase and change in support? Any final advice you would give to those folks with what should they be doing?
I think the key in the midst of this is to find a trusted advisor, somebody who is not attached to one side or the other, but somebody who can introduce Microsoft and Hyper-V or Storage Spaces Direct, Azure Stack HCI. Like I said, I work in and amongst a group of Microsoft MVPs, absolutely brilliant people, much more so than I. And there is a solid group of folks who can sit down, look at the situation and say, let us help you. Let us help you go. So that's advice point number one, is find somebody who can help navigate the from and the to. Not just the from and not just the to. Because if there's that gap in between, it will not necessarily be a happy experience. And that's, just not a happy place. So that's the first point of order, is to find somebody who can help navigate that process. And then from there, accept the advice or get a second opinion. There's a lot of us. There's quite a few of us out there that can help. So definitely talk to one or more if you need to and navigate through. Remember that the key, so point number 2, the key in all of this is the outcome, right? It's the outcome. What is the outcome? Well, my users are still clicking. My users are still productive. My business is still online. My business revenue is still happening. My business is continuing forward. So IT always has to remember that. It's not about my hardware. It's not about my software. It's not about my solution. It's not about anything. In the end, it's about the folks that are clicking, that are making the company money. And that is the key. So if I have that perspective in play, that makes the process a little bit easier too. And keep the ego in check, I think, is the third thing. Because I know from my own experience, I've developed a tact, if you will, being parachuted in and just asking lots of questions. So we have opinions and we have ways we want to go. And our trusted advisor is the person to look to, hey, guys, I think this is what we need to do. And here's reasons why. And talk it out.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. You know, this is a complex topic, and having a trusted advisor is really important. And like you said, at the end of the day, IT is there to support business outcomes. That's so important that, you know, we have to step back, look at what's your business really trying to accomplish and what solutions are gonna meet that, and how do we keep the lights on and the users helping us to make money as an organization. So, or deliver whatever service, you know, maybe we're even talking about government or some other entity. So yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. So we'll wrap it up here. I want to say thank you so much, Philip, for coming on. This has been a really enjoyable conversation. Hopefully we can talk again sometime in the future. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to this episode. Hope you'll come back for some of the additional episodes in the series. We've got several more really great guests scheduled. You can also find more content at richardsoncloud.com. Thanks again, Philip.
You're very welcome. It was great. Thank you.